I'm delighted to be opening the 2021 London Car Free Days Summit with our panel Non-Commercial Cargo Bikes Where Next. My name's Charles Critchell. I'm the founder and managing director of Fair City, a city transport think tank and not-for-profit who work to empower city users to consider making more sustainable mobility choices. So we've done some extensive work on cargo bikes in the last 18 months, starting with our award-winning research in January 2020, which was then the basis of the UK's first non-commercial cargo bike policy report, which we published in May this year. We also interviewed London mayoral candidates on the front of a cargo bike in association with Pedal Me, a cargo bike logistics company. So the videos are on our website, so definitely give them a watch. So we're here for Car Free Day, and it's all about providing people with viable alternatives to using cars and motorised modes of transport in cities across the world. And we really believe that cargo bikes have a big role to play in this. So in the commercial sector, we've got cargo bikes replacing vans to decarbonise last mile deliveries. And in the non-commercial sector, we have cargo bikes replacing cars to move people and goods for shorter trips. What we found is that the majority of panels on cargo bikes are focusing in on the commercial sector. And consequently, this is where a lot of the funding is concentrated. Even this week, in the UK, the Department for Transport launched the latest round of funding for commercial cargo bikes. And it's just interesting to note there is no such scheme for the non-commercial sector yet. It's also important to make the distinction when we talk about non-commercial use. We're talking about families, but also families, friends, community groups and organisations. And the latter have really grown in importance during the pandemic. So when we first set out our research, we asked why these groups are using cargo bikes. And now and through the course of this panel, we're asking how these groups can be better supported to increase cargo bike uptake. So while funding, infrastructure and access are important, we really recognise that these things are facilitated by a wide range of city stakeholders. Fortunately, we've got some of these stakeholders here today to tell us how they think we can entice more people to consider using non-commercial cargo bikes. All the panelists actually own a cargo bike, including the host Hamish, that's great. So they can speak authoritatively with first-hand knowledge of some of the issues we're going to be looking at. So just going to introduce the panelists. So first up, we've got Alper Midyaroğlu. Alper is the founder of Pedal My Wheels, a Croydon-based cycle supplier that aims to make cycling accessible and affordable for everyone. We've then got Gareth Roberts, leader of the London Borough of Richmond upon Thames in southwest London. Bex Mountford, who is a bicycle mayor for the town of Cheltenham in the southwest of England. And Jos Sluismans, who's the founder of the International Cargo Bike Festival, and that's held annually in the Netherlands. So just before we get going, we've got our 4 panelist presentations, then going to have some moderated questions. Then going to follow in with some audience questions. So just following up from what Hamish said, please do type them into the chat. And we're going to close with some concluding remarks. So first of all, I'm just going to hand over to Alper, who's going to kick us off. Thanks, Alper.
Thanks, Charles. Hi, everyone. Let's go straight into my presentation. So, yeah, I started Pedal My Wheels back in 2012, and we basically run cycle initiatives with local councils in London at the moment. Started with our second-hand bike market. We've added a scheme called Try Before You Bike, and this year we're launching a cargo bike scheme called Our Bike. So the bike markets are an initiative to create affordable bike stock for community. We run them in, well, pre-COVID, we used to run between 150 and 200 a year pop-up events, often in schools. So people bring their unwanted outgrown bikes, which we service and then sell on behalf of the person who's brought them in. The Try Before You Bike scheme, which is probably our main scheme now, we're currently running this in 21 London boroughs, and it's a hire scheme, you order a bike online, and as you can see from the photos, a whole range of bikes, and then you pay a monthly fee for that bike. So it could be £20 for a standard bike, for cargo bikes from £100 for a month. And whilst you're using it, you can decide whether you want to purchase the bike. There's different options to buy it. If it isn't for you, you can just cancel and we come and collect the bike from you. But we include support with that. So it's very much focusing on novice cyclists, people who haven't used cargo bikes, people who haven't used electric bikes, so they haven't got the commitment of buying a new one. Yeah, as I said, we're in 21 boroughs. Big uptake from women, which is encouraging, 68%. Nearly 80% go on to buy the bike either through us or through a local shop. And a lot of people use it as an affordable scheme where they haven't got the cycle to work scheme, for example, because they can pay monthly. So our new cargo bike scheme, which we've been working on for a while, it's a cargo bike share scheme. So a sort of zip cars, but for cargo bikes. Couple of models that we're looking at. We're due to have the first one start in Hammersmith and Fulham in the next month to 2 months, and another one in Southwark. The Hammersmith and Fulham one will work on the basis that the bikes will be kept in a locker with a smart lock on. So you download the Our Bike app, you can reserve the bike and you use it by the hour. And it being a partnership with the council, it will be subsidised by them. So we're probably looking at sort of free use for the first 2 to 4 hours, and then there'll be an hourly fee to use it. The other model is a partnership. We're trying this in Southwark with local businesses. So the business will host the bike, which means charging the battery overnight, just keeping an eye on it. They can use it themselves, but it's also available for people to hire by the hour. And they're our main schemes for now.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Alpa. Good to hear about what you've been doing and working with so many London boroughs, including Richmond, which Gareth leads. Actually, a friend of Fair City who lives in Richmond used the partnership between Pedal My Wheels and Richmond Council to first try and then buy a cargo bike. So definitely is working. Councils play a very important role, not only in partnering for schemes such as this, in both the distribution of council budget and more recently, as a result of the pandemic, the application and use of active travel funding, although admittedly this is something which has been handled differently by different authorities across the UK. So this now brings us nicely on to Gareth, the leader of Richmond Council, who's hopefully going to tell us a bit more about how councils make decisions and the types of factors they must consider when implementing pro-cycling measures. So Gareth, if you'd like to take it away.
Afternoon, everybody. Just so you're aware, my type of presentation is slightly odd, but I've sat through lots of death by PowerPoints and I tend to look for something that's a bit more illustrative. So hello, my name is Gareth. I'm the leader of the London Borough of Richmond upon Thames and Liberal Democrat leader, one of the few Liberal Democrat councils that we have. But more importantly, for the purposes of today, I am also a cargo bike driver. There you go, driver, owner, whatever you like to call it. And I would also like to think that possibly the only London Borough leader that actually owns and, more importantly, uses a cargo bike. First borough leader to use a cargo bike? Almost certainly. If I'm not the only one, almost certainly the first. And the one which I would challenge anybody on is the fact that we're the only London borough where both the leader and the deputy leader are both cargo bike users. You'll see that he's got an electric one because, of course, he's not as butch as I am with my big, thick thighs, which project children along the road on a daily basis. And what I'm here to talk about today is the idea of councils and councillors as societal influencers. I wanted to say social influencers because that's all a bit more hip and, you know, trendy with the young people. But of course, it's societal influencers, which we actually are. And we do this in lots of ways. So we can change people's behaviour about whether it's their bins, their recycling, which is a case, about how they use their local high streets, about how they interact with local businesses. The big grid map that you can see there is all about conservation areas within local areas. So we can change how the local areas look. We can change how people behave. So the question is, why can't we have similar impacts upon how people get around our boroughs? And it's a bit of an uphill struggle, to be honest, because for the last however many years, I mean, since the 80s, you would switch the television on an almost nightly basis, and you would see game show after game show after game show, having the aspiration, the star prize, the great thing which everybody wanted to have, and that was the car. And every now and again, it was a speedboat, but of course, largely it was the car. And it's going to be really tricky to change that mindset. Of course, if you did used to watch a lot of game shows as well, you would see bikes as prizes, but it was usually a couple of little BMXs for the kids to run about on. And that's the mindset that we've got to now try to start changing, because the idea of the car as the aspirational item has become so ingrained that very few people are willing to give them up and try something different. So how can councils influence change? Well, there are two parts to this, and the first one is normalisation, the second one is facilitation. And normalisation is to do with leading by example, because what you need to do, you can't be a councillor, you can't be a council leader and say everybody, look, you need to get into your bikes, you need to be more sustainable, and then jump into your diesel 4x4 and drive off and do something else. You have to do something which you believe in, and I believe that the way forward for our borough and for boroughs across London and across the country is to be more sustainable, and that includes the greater use of cargo bikes for getting around on a day-to-day basis, not necessarily always taking kids, it's always taking all sorts of things. And we use our profile to normalise it. Now, anybody who's got a cargo bike will have been asked many times, did you build it yourself? Now, I'm not Will Flunn, for those of you of a certain age, so no, I didn't build my own cargo bike. It's not something odd, it's not something weird. It's something which you should be getting used to. And the idea that you would just walk up to somebody on a normal bike and say, oh, that's lovely, did you build it yourself? That should be, out of the window as long as with cargo bikes. And we use the profile through various things. So we use the social media, we use our own leaflets, and we use the power of the local media. So these are what I've been using my social media for, is to show, it's a campaigning vehicle. It's to show that, anything can be transported. The bottom right has got me with two Christmas trees, 6-foot ones in there. And of course, there's a Facebook page, which the kids are going to really hate that I shared this picture on the presentation. They're going to be livid, but there you go. So it's just showing the difference. It's humanizing them. And of course, you can get into a conversation with people on social media about cargo bikes. So this time I took my kids to a sleepover, and then somebody asked me, but why have you got the Brompton in there as well? And it's because my daughter had got to the age where she didn't want to be seen being carted around in a cycle in a cargo bike. So we took the Brompton as well. She used that, I used that, and then we took each other home. But if the idea was there that, well, I can't possibly take my daughter to a sleepover and go to the supermarket afterwards unless I use a car, well, of course you can. You just have to think about how you're going to manage it. Unfortunately, sometimes when you do the local media, you can't control the message. So here we go. We did this was in conjunction with Tim Lennon and the Richmond Cycling Campaign. We had a marketplace in our school to say, here's the type of cargo bikes you can get. Come along, try them out and see what you get. And we got good coverage. However, it was described as being a wacky bike. Now, nobody likes to be wacky because that's wacky. Nobody wants that. You want to be seen as being normal every day, and that's what we're trying to achieve. So normalization is important. And the reason why normalization is important is because, as Hannibal Lecter says, we begin by coveting that which we see every day. And people who see cargo bikes being used on a daily basis will start to think to themselves, well, is that something for me? Is that something I could choose? And also their kids look at the cargo bikes and say, the other kids are in and say, Mum, Dad, that looks really cool. I'd love to be in one of those. And it starts them thinking. So it's normalization is a big part of it, but also facilitation, because there's no point in getting people onto their cargo bikes if it's impossible for them to either get around or to store the thing. Now, there are 4 key players who are going to be important in facilitation. There's national government, local government, other transport providers, and journalists. In terms of what the local council and what local government can do, is that we can start putting in the appropriate infrastructure. So we've just approved a whole raft of new school streets at the Transport Committee, which was held earlier this week. And we're getting even people like Will Norman, who's the Mayor's Transport Commissioner, approving the fact that we're doing it, and he's retweeting and re-emphasizing our messages. School streets are absolutely key, because if you can't drive your 4x4 to the door, But you can, if you invest in a cargo bike, go right up to the door and drop your kids off. More people may consider doing that rather than always relying on the car. We've introduced 20 miles an hour across all roads in the borough, with a few exceptions, and we're one of the first boroughs to do this. Others have got 20-mile-an-hour zones, others have got, residential streets only. We've taken the decision to have, I think it's something like 98% of every road in the borough is 20 miles an hour, and that will encourage more people to feel safer on the roads. We're also investing in segregated cycle lanes. This one is on Kew Road. And these are not ideal for every cargo bike, I will grant you. Some of the larger tricycle ones have difficulty because they are still slightly narrow, but we are trying our best where we can to make sure that there's the infrastructure in place in order to encourage all types of cycling, in particular cargo bikes, to use the road, because every cargo bike and every cycle on the road is one car off the road. Just for illustration, this is what Kew Road used to look like. It was parked cars, the length and breadth of the road. So what we've done, we've taken those parked cars off and we've made sure that there is space for cycling. And that's not gone down particularly well with a lot of residents, but it's the right thing to do. And we have no plans to remove this cycle lane. What we've also done, this is more to do with businesses rather than people, but we've also given away 14 e-cargo bikes to local businesses and charities. Again, it's the normalisation, it's the facilitation, it's the getting them out there, being seen as a genuine alternative to cars. What we do also need to do as councillors, however, is to make sure that we're not just being snippy, the sheer hell of being snippy. And this is a clear example of what happens sometimes when councillors will be populist, and I have them in the Lib Dems. I'm not saying that we're completely pure, but they will decide to have a go at active travel measures simply for the sake of opposing. So this tweet here, which is saying there's going to be chaos because of the cycle lane that we've put in, is actually tweeted out by one of our local spokespersons for the opposition on transport issues. We need to be better as councillors. So this is an important part of it. All of us need to be seized of the importance of providing better transport options for people. And it's always interesting because the lazy term is chaos. That's just a bus pulling out onto a dual carriageway. This is their idea of what happens when you put in better cycling provision. That's chaos. Putting in cycling lanes is not. We also need to think about how people store these bikes. This is my old house. I bought a tricycle cargo bike once and then brought it home, very full of myself, absolutely delighted. My door was the black one, and then tried to get it through the front door. And it wouldn't fit, so I had to sell it almost as soon as I bought it because I hadn't thought the thing through. So we need to look at how we can facilitate, because if people have got garages or large bike gardens, that's fine, but we need to be able to facilitate those people who don't have in-house parking. What we have here, though, is the challenge. That's one size of a cargo bike against what you can do with a normal on-street hanger. And yeah, we do want to try to provide more on-street hangers. However, when space is at a premium, do we prioritize a hanger which is going to work for lots of people or a hanger which is just going to work for one bike? And of course you can get them, but we know that cargo bikes retain their value and that they are easily targeted by thieves, and having a specialist cargo bike hanger could be the equivalent of this, please don't steal from me. We know that people will go around with their angle grinders and take them from front gardens. So we need to make sure that if we are providing storage, that it's safe, secure, and fit for purpose. We also need to make sure that we're designing these things out because, you can get people around, but these types of barriers are absolutely ludicrous. So we're conducting a review of our barriers across the borough to make sure that we're removing these. They're also terribly bad for people with mobility issues. So we need to try to make sure that we're designing out barriers to better cycling, and cargo bikes in particular. Those ones, by the way, we'll just get rid of. They probably impede a normal cycle, let alone a cargo bike. And we're looking at whether we can start allowing cargo bikes to visit our dump without having to book, which would be a real boon and a real incentive for people to change their way of getting to the tip. And we also need to work better with our transport partners. This is when I first bought my cargo bike, and this was in 2012. It was a Saturday morning, bringing it back. I went over to Amsterdam to buy it from Work Cycles. And I came back, got it all the way to London, put it on this train, which was a Saturday morning service going back to Hampton. And the train driver refused to move because I was blocking the train, I was stopping people from allowing, moving freely about it. And we need to ensure that train operators are educating their staff to encourage greater use of alternative bikes, not just the fold-ups, not just the standard bike. We need to make sure that they are fully trained and fully aware of the benefits and that they do not cause problems on buses and trains. And we also need to make sure that our stations are being properly adapted so that if the new lift is put in, that it's big enough to accommodate cargo bike. This is from Twickenham Station. Twickenham Station was completed just about 12 months ago. And this is a brand new lift, never been put in before. And you wouldn't struggle to get a cargo bike in there. And of course, the alternative is this. And if you're not going to get a cargo bike up those stairs at all, so sometimes I'm a lazy tyke and will sometimes put the cargo bike on the train and then jump off. But I have to make sure that it's a place where I can be assured of getting out of the station. So I would never take it as far as Twickenham, whereas that could have been designed out immediately when they did the refurbishment of the station. In terms of government, we need to make sure that there's going to be better incentives and better tax breaks, perhaps, for people who wish to invest in cargo cycles. And we need to make sure that, if possible, that they will give the necessary incentives to councils to put in better infrastructure, such as the storage facilities. And we also need to have better journalism. Now, Jeremy Vine is on many ways a very good advocate for cycling within the capital. However, he does allow people onto his show, or his producers allow them onto the show, which absolutely destroy all of the good work he does. People like Mike Parry, who will just be motor mouths, who will just carp and fetch and moan about any types of things, which takes away the right of the motorist. Yes, motorists have rights, but cyclists have rights as well. And we shouldn't be facilitating and enabling the people who will talk cycling down simply in order to get radio clickbait for journalists and for news clickbaits for journalists. It should just stop. So we need to make sure that those four key elements are all working together to try to facilitate better share, because change is coming, but we need to be able to make sure that all of the people who are making that change are delivering the right change and speaking with a unified voice. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Gareth. Some really good points. And I think, the whole idea about changing mindsets through both normalization and facilitation is, just really critical. So while councils represent formal governance and typically favour a more top-down approach, and now want us to consider the role of informal governance, typically associated with a more bottom-up approach. And I think one of the interesting things about the pandemic is it's reinforced the importance of local communities and the role of advocates, campaigners, and especially local residents. For instance, we've seen residents coning off streets to allow for social distancing before councils were able to respond. So to tell us a bit more about how advocacy organisations are encouraging greater levels of cycling and cargo bike use is Bex, who is Cheltenham's first bicycle mayor.
Hello, I don't have a presentation, I'm afraid, but I'm just going to talk to you for a bit about what we've been up to. So from the start, I don't remember learning to ride, so I guess it's been a while. I always loved it and the freedom it brought, especially being a young child. There's nothing else that replicates, riding your bike as a small child. I started mountain biking at 16, and then cycling was my transport when I moved towns and started living on my own at 18. It was also my safe way of getting home at night from pubs and clubs, which, some of my other female friends didn't feel safe walking home. I could jump on my bike and go. I had a couple of bikes stolen and then found myself not cycling for about 10 years. We moved to the countryside, and there was a lot of fast A roads, and we were miles from anywhere useful. And then came along the babies and I tried cycling with a trailer and then with a seat on the back of my bike, and neither felt comfortable. My health wasn't great, my fitness wasn't great, and I just couldn't seem to find that ease and magic of cycling that I used to enjoy. And I still hadn't learned to drive at this point, and now I had 2 children and we're moving back into a town environment. So I had a big decision to make: either learn to drive or have one last go at cycling with kids. So with a very generous loan from my mum, we took the plunge and bought Urban Arrow off eBay from Cambridge, without ever having tried a cargo bike before. But it's not the first big decision I've made without trying it. I also bought a narrowboat to live on without ever having stayed on one before, and but luckily both decisions were good. And the cargo bike it's just been amazing, and it's changed my life. And I have one child who has ADHD and really struggles with sitting still and things like that. So it's been brilliant for him that we almost have no complaints going in the bike, and he enjoys it, and we get places. I can go door to door, so I don't even have to try and get him from the car park to where we're going. It's just been fantastic, and the only issue is now we want another one, because sometimes my husband will want to go and do one thing on the weekend, and I'll want to do another, and we both want to take the bike. We're just so used to now, you know, driving around our town, which you can cycle from edge to edge within about 15 to 20 minutes. It just seems totally the wrong thing to jump in a car when you can jump on a bike. And often I have raced my husband home a couple of times when we've been places and he's been in the car, and I either beat him or we get home at about the same time. So it is no quicker to drive across town either. And then I mean, the bicycle mare thing came about from, I just love talking to people about my cargo bike. I get stopped all the time, and also just being passionate about wanting to help other people, whether it be cargo bikes or getting their kids on bikes. I home educate my kids, and I started a bike group at one of the local bike tracks so that we could get more kids riding. And one of the kids turned up the other day and they finally got their stabilizers off and they're on pedals now, and it's just, you know, just so nice seeing other people finding that joy. But yeah, with cargo bikes, I just realized how life-changing they could be for other people too. And they can seem really expensive, especially when you compare them to other bikes. But if you compare them to the price of a car and all the additional expenses, and when you look at how much cars depreciate as well, I mean, I think my cargo bike now is about 3.5 years old, and I could probably sell it for about what I bought it for. Which is, you know, it's compared to a car, it's just great for that side of things. From here going forward, we do need to see more change from our councils. I mean, in Cheltenham, it's slow to see anything happening really as far as infrastructure and things like that, and what we are seeing isn't really good enough, especially when you're talking about an alternative to just a two-wheeled regular bike. And we need to see upgrading of old cycle paths as well to make them fit for all types of bikes. We need barriers removed, and we need junctions upgraded as well. I led a women's ride around Cheltenham a few weeks back, and in planning the ride, I wanted to take in as many bits of cycling infrastructure as I could, so anyone new to cycling might find some bits that would be useful on their journeys around town. But in planning the route, I also had to consider, will all bikes make this gap? And I shouldn't have to be thinking that. I should just be able to plan a route knowing it's suitable for all. And similarly, when thinking about cycling with children, either in my bike or riding next to me, there should be clear routes crisscrossing town that we know are safe enough for me and them. Children make up about 20% of our population, yet we don't offer them a safe route across town without needing their parents to ferry them by car. Which also brings me to the point of the longevity of the cargo bike. I believe that long-tail cargo bikes are more popular in the UK than America, than they are in the Netherlands, where by the time children are of the age of going on the back of a long-tail, they're pedaling themselves on, you know, reasonably safe infrastructure. And I want to see more people riding cargo bikes, but I also want to see kids not needing to be in cargo bikes once they're old enough to be independently cycling. And my eldest is 7, and he's just getting to the age now where he really wants to cycle himself, and there's only a few places to do that. But I mean, even we can go, luckily with the cargo bike, I can put his bike still just about in the cargo bike, and I can take him to where it's safe to cycle. But, you know, I'd rather he be able to ride himself wherever we want to go, sort of thing. Also passionate about helping women cycle. Men make 3 times as many journeys by bike as women do in the UK, but in countries with higher numbers of women cycling, statistically, there are more people cycling altogether. So if we can get more women cycling, we'll get, you know, that shows that our infrastructure feels good and safe for all. So that would be great also. Going forward, I'd love to help more women to ride, either by learning to ride a bike, helping them gain confidence, or helping them choose the right bike for them. But I want to be able to do that with the backing of great infrastructure for them to ride on. I don't just want to be sending people off and then them getting scared and not wanting to ride at all. And there was one more point that I wanted to bring up, which I forgot to add to what I've written. I put out a tweet poll the other day about, if you own a cargo bike that you use for small children, do you intend to keep it once they've grown, once they're too big to go in the cargo bike regularly? 74% said yes, they would keep their cargo bike. And only 4% said no, with 7% saying that they would sell it to fund a long tail, and there were 15% that made other comments. So I think it shows that we're also lacking in a second-hand market of cargo bikes, which is what keeps the price of my cargo bike, as the resale value of my cargo bike, so high, because there's just not enough stock, and people are waiting months and months for 6 months or longer to get a cargo bike. So I think we need better infrastructure, more bikes, and better storage within town centres for them as well, like Gareth brought up with cargo bike hangers and things like that would be amazing too. So I think that's it.
That was excellent. That was a tour de force. Thanks very much. You're not only talking about how empowering cycling can be for not only new users but people that may have ridden before, but also how sustainable cargo bikes are in terms of retaining their value, but also in their use as well. People using them afterwards, after maybe the kids don't use them. So we've been focusing on the UK and in particular London. However, I think it's important that we now consider what we've heard in the context of cargo bike use in other countries and cities. So I'd therefore like to invite Jos to share some of his insights as to how other places are encouraging greater cargo bike use. So Jos, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I'm quite honored to be here with an all British audience and other panelists. And I'm not sure what I'm hearing. You guys already know so much about cargo bikes, so I do not really know whether I can add something that you don't know. But nevertheless, I prepared something to tell you, and I hope you will like what I have to say. You can hear me properly, and you also see the slides now. Is that okay? Then I'll tell a little bit about the history of family cargo bikes and about the Cargo Bike Festival and some general things. It's not working. Excuse me. I'll try another. Maybe I did something.
It's okay, Jos. If you just try and reshare it again, that'll be fine.
Yeah. Let me see. I think now it's working. Yes. It was already mentioned, the Christiania. That was actually the start of modern cargo bikes. It was in the 1972 when in Denmark, in Copenhagen, in the free state of Christiania, they started building cargo bikes, and then it was kind of a hippie thing, and it was quite a while kind of a hippie thing, but that's how it started. And actually these cargo bikes were not bikes but trikes, and but we call it bikes anyway. In the Netherlands, the modern cargo bike for family use started in the 90s. It was Martin van Andel who made from a regular bike, he put in a box, a front loader. And actually that was the start of the brand Bakfiets.nl. The Dutch name for a cargo bike is Bakfiets, and well, actually, they were very smart in using this as a brand name because, well, everybody knows it now, and that's a smart thing to do, I guess. in comparison with the Netherlands and Denmark, in the US and also in the UK, I think Bex already mentioned it. Longtails are much more popular. There are quite some brands that build longtails, and this is actually a Yuba, and this is one family. So the mother with 5 children, and she's pregnant, and they did really right. This picture is from several years ago, but that's really how they rode around in our town. They lived in Nijmegen then, and a lot of this history of making the longtails you can see in the movie Motherlode that was made by Liz Canning some years ago. And when you have a chance to see that, that's really worth watching. I always was quite surprised to see this difference in trikes in Denmark, cargo bikes in the Netherlands, and longtails in the US and the UK. I do not know really why it is that way, but you still see today that this difference of appreciation of the different kind of cargo bikes is still visible in the streets. Oh, this is the wrong one. The amount of cargo bikes is really growing these last years. In Denmark, I know in Copenhagen, it has been said by Michael Colville Anderson of Copenhagen Ice that already 10 years ago there were about like 40,000 cargo bikes in Copenhagen, and that's still the number that is mentioned today. I think it should be more, because everywhere else there is a growing amount of cargo bikes, and I don't think there's a reason why that would not be in Copenhagen, but I don't know that much about it. In the Netherlands, also 10 years ago, in the whole country, the whole Netherlands, there were probably something like 40,000 cargo bikes 10 years ago. But now it's estimated that there are about 125,000 to 140,000, of which 90 to 95% is privately owned, so family cargo bikes, and only 5 to 10% is owned by businesses. And the general growth of cargo bikes is about 15 to 20% per year. That has been for several years now, and the expectation is that will go on this decade. Well, actually, that's to say, we of the Cargo Bike Festival, we declared the 20s the decade of the cargo bike. So if you want to, with the hashtag decade of the cargo bike, you find a lot of information about the developments in cargo bikes nowadays. Well, one of the questions that were asked was, what do you need to do to encourage the growth and the use of cargo bikes? Actually, one of the very logical and interesting things is there have to be cargo bike shops, and there have to be cargo bikes. We see now really that Bex already mentioned it. I think that there is a long, you have to wait a long time when you want to purchase a cargo bike, and it's quite essential that they are available. But also in a lot of countries there are no real cargo bike shops yet, and so that's important that they become available. Then of course the infrastructure. Gareth Roberts already talked about that also a lot. That's very essential. Limited access for motorized vehicles. We see in all our countries in Europe that many cities are prohibiting motorized vehicles in larger parts of the city. In the Netherlands, for instance, in 2025, it's not completely forbidden, but delivery by fossil fuel vehicles will be very, very limited, and that of course will give a lot of opportunities for zero emission vehicles like cargo bikes. Good and safe parking facilities is something that's needed. Schemes for cargo bike sharing will help a lot. I also believe a lot that showing the best practices, so telling stories about people that do use cargo bikes and that all kinds of users of cargo bikes with family, with entrepreneurs, many ways to do that. The funding was already mentioned, and of course also by organizing events, doing good marketing, and well, we made a cargo bike magazine, but that's also a good way to spread the word. Good journalism is mentioned, and of course that's very important. Talking about the events, the Cargo Bike Festival. I started the Cargo Bike Festival in 2012, and actually it was more because in the Netherlands we already had the use of family bikes, but very little use of commercial cargo bikes. And so for me that was a reason to show that could be a way of doing things, of deliveries, of services in our city as well. I call it a festival where professionals can meet to talk about their ideas, to talk about their technical knowledge, but also a lot of fun. I think it's very important to have fun for the children, but actually for everybody. So it was the title festival was really chosen to also to have some music, to have good food, good drinks, and everything like that. I already mentioned cargo bike sharing as good ways of promoting the use of cargo bikes, that is really getting started in the Netherlands. And there are some really good examples in other European countries, like in Switzerland. There is the Carvelo to Go program. They have about 300 e-cargo bikes in some 70 cities in Switzerland. And the cargo bikes are hosted by entrepreneurs that take care of the exchange of the cargo bikes, and that they are charged when necessary. It's all done with an app to make it very comfortable to use. Also in Germany, the last years there has been a really large growing community of what I call vrije Lastenräder, free cargo bikes. There are in 122 municipalities over 150 locations where cargo bikes are located, and people in the neighborhoods can use the cargo bikes to a very limited amount of money. There are also some European sharing programs like e-hubs. E-hubs is not only about cargo bikes, but it's also with e-cars, e-scooters, e-mopeds, and things like that. And in the UK, also Manchester is member of this program, and I think they will start implementing the cargo bike sharing one of these weeks or really short notice. And the cargo bikes they use there are from Cargaroo, is the one you see in the picture as well. And in the Netherlands, they are active in several cities now. And another company that does this kind of cargo bike sharing is BakMe. And BakMe is spelled with a Q, but it comes from the bakfiets and then BakMe, that you can use it. And well, actually BakMe is an example of how the cargo bike is really becoming more popular, because they started a crowdfunding yesterday, and I saw their goal was to get 400,000 euros, and in 35 minutes it was already there. So people are really waiting to invest or to help to boost the cargo bikes, and well, that's quite amazing, I think, and a good sign. So there is hope for that.
That's brilliant. Apologies, Jos, I'm just going to have to cut you short. Sorry to do this, but we are pushing time, and I do
Okay.
questions, if I may.
Yeah, I understand.
Sorry about that.
Well,
it's always
no,
hard
no
when you're last.
Yeah.
We'll blame
well,
Gareth.
you can read this to what I put on to do, and I think we'll go to the questions then.
Brilliant. Thank you, and apologies for that. Excellent.
Thank you.
I think you made a really good point, Jos, about the cargo bike sharing schemes, which are obviously happening across Europe and really been quite successful as well. And because, as we know, here in London just last week, it's the first sort of sharing scheme which has been set up in Hackney, which is sort of similar to what Alp is suggesting as well. As I say, I'm conscious of time. We've got about 12 minutes, so we're going to just have some quick fire questions now. So if I can just ask all panelists to keep their answers nice and concise. We're just going to go to Alpa first. So Alpa, obviously great work. We're working with different London boroughs, which is started back in 2014. So if I can just ask, what's the key thing which has resonated with councils about supporting your partner schemes? So I'm thinking about the one big thing that sells it to them.
It's a one-off payment. So normally loan schemes, or most schemes in partnerships with councils, every year you have to go back for more money. We're working on the basis that our scheme becomes a self-financing model. So the try before you bike, because people are paying for the trial fee, that goes back into our pot. Ultimately, people are buying bikes, and therefore we can replenish our stock. So that side of it, training being going alongside the delivery of the bikes, maintenance going alongside delivery of the bikes. Basically, every objection to cycling, which often is just a knee-jerk response, we've got an answer for. Whether they then get a bike is another matter, but I'd say that's a full package. We do it all, and they only have to pay us once for it. And budgets are tight, unfortunately.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, and it's obviously very, very sort of important for councils just to sort of have that one point of contact. And talking of which, if we just move on to Gareth now, I just wanted to ask, obviously in London specifically, we've got a very mixed picture regarding how different councils sort of handle sort of cycling. You know, a couple of examples, obviously the removal of the cycle lane in Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea sort of springs to mind. So really what I wanted to know was, as the leader of a council who supports cycling, what advice can you give to any councillors up and down the country who might want to be bolder in implementing pro-cycling measures, but for whatever reason are finding it difficult?
Hold your nerve. To be honest, you will get pushback, you will get immediate knee-jerk reactions, and the people who oppose things shout the loudest, but because they shout the loudest, it doesn't mean they're the most number of people. Most people are quite happy to see new ways of getting about, new ways of developing infrastructure across the borough. And the people who like things, you don't get people walking around in the streets with placards saying more of this sort of thing. It just doesn't happen. So you have to listen to well-grounded, evidence-based concerns, and perhaps amend schemes if you feel it's necessary, and if the evidence backs it up. But just loads of people saying this is going to cause chaos on our roads when they've got not a shred of evidence to back it up. You just have to hold your nerve and hope that the opposition groups within the council will also behave like grown-ups and adults, because all of this stuff about there's no planet B, it's true. We can't go around in Richmond upon Thames. Sorry, I'm being quite lengthy now. We can't go around in Richmond upon Thames saying how marvellous it is that we have David Attenborough living in the borough, and what a joy and an expert and what an inspiration he is, if the minute that you get the chance, you just decide to trash everything he's saying just for the sake of a few votes.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, as you sort of point out there, obviously we've got the London, we've got local council elections next year. So I guess it sort of works in cycles as to how brave you can be at different points of sort of the term. Just moving on to Bex then. So I'm just thinking, Bex, how can advocates such as yourself work with or apply pressure on formal governance, so people like Gareth, so councils and councillors, to sort of ensure that pro-cycling measures go ahead? Because obviously not every council is going to be as pro-cycling or may have different things to contend with.
Yeah, I mean, I've recently become a parish councillor as well, so not that I can do a great deal being a parish councillor, but we're letter writing and talking to people where we can. I'm also using social media, my own Facebook pages, and we've got a local Cheltenham and Tewkesbury cycling campaign where we're just trying to get the word out there. And just hoping that if our council does seem reasonably good, if enough people write and say this isn't good enough, we want better, then they do seem to listen. But we do need people to be doing that and actually writing to their councillors and telling them what they want. We need feet on the ground and actual action that way. I'm also chatting via email to various councillors and things like that to see what we can do and how I can help and things like that. But yeah, I mean, until the councils actually say this is what we want cycling infrastructure, this is how we're going to do it, it just feels a bit of a grind, but yeah.
Quite interesting, and really sort of obviously mobilizing people to sort of apply pressure, but then I guess, like you're saying, it's that whole supply and demand sort of issue. There's got to be something coming back for people to sort of want sort of more as. So final question from me, this is going back to Jos, really talking about the distinction between commercial and non-commercial. I think what's very interesting is that in the UK it's been the commercial sector which has been booming, whereas in the Netherlands, it was the success of the non-commercial sector, which led you to make the case for commercial cargo bikes via the International Cargo Bike Festival. So with regard to the UK, Jos, what do you make of the current approach in the UK? So sort of like pushing the commercial cargo bike use. And do you see UK rental schemes as a way of unlocking commercial sector funding and raising visibility for non-commercial use?
That are quite some questions.
Yes.
It's not that easy.
If there's anyone that can answer it, it's you.
Well, I think these rental schemes are for all use of cargo bikes. They are very important because for a lot of people there are several barriers to use cargo bikes, be it commercially used or privately used. It can be the financial barrier to purchase it as such, but also mainly the parking problem. I think for a lot of people in private use of cargo bikes, the parking is quite an issue. So when you have several rental schemes that provide maybe parking, or when that you can put the bike somewhere else when you don't use it, that's a very good use of. And also, a lot of people don't know yet whether they will use a cargo bike a lot or not. So when you want to use it once a week, then a rental or sharing scheme is really good way to get used to a cargo bike. So is that an answer to your question?
No, it's certainly most of the way there. No, thank you. I think that's a really important point. So if we're looking at the sort of try before you buy, which obviously Alpa has sort of been, proponent of sort of rolling that out, and unfortunately not everyone, I guess, is sort of as brave as Bex just to sort of buy something without trying it first. So yeah, certainly the try before you buy is important. So we've just got time, unfortunately, just for a couple of audience questions. Not sure if they're questions as such, more observations, but I'll open them up. So I just, both Hamish and Kim have been talking about UK-based manufacturers. I know that Raleigh are producing a cargo bike. It might actually be on the market, but I just wondered, Alpa, if you knew what was going on there and whether you would be stocking UK-based manufacturers' bikes.
I mean, we stock Ridgeback, which is part of Sportsline, who are UK-based. obviously the bikes aren't made in this country. It's been an issue definitely the last, because of COVID and Brexit, unfortunately, but with cargo bikes in particular, getting stock. I know of one company, they do adaptive bikes and they're moving into cargo bikes, but when that'll be ready, I don't know. Yeah, it is an issue, and it follows something else was mentioned about financing and leasing and all these types of things. Margins are quite low on cargo bikes. By the time you get them over, there isn't so much to play with. So as soon as you start getting into leasing and all these types of things, yeah, as a business, it can get quite difficult to be financially sustainable. But that's definitely a thing. Hopefully in the next year or 2 years, the transportation catches up and we can get back to deliveries of at least within 3 months. At the moment, the bikes we're getting are taking 6 months plus to get to us. So it's an issue, definitely. And you have to have a lot of storage space, which all our money has gone on storage space. We're stockpiling as much as we can. Fortunately, cargo bikes are getting to us and they are going out. So it's positive news, but yeah, it's a challenge.
Okay, thanks for that. I've also got a good question from David. It's just sort of with anyone's got any views on government schemes for people to swap their cars for cargo bikes, similar to sort of what's happening, I guess, in the commercial sector with vans, things like that. I don't know if anyone's got a view on that, or maybe Jos, you could tell us is there anything comparable in the Netherlands or anywhere else in Europe?
Swapping cars by cargo bike. Not. I think in France they had a program like that. And I think in the Netherlands it's more like swapping mopeds by e-bikes or e-cargo bikes. But that's something. The cargo bike as such is not, at least in the Netherlands, is not really funded in that way. In Germany, there are really lots of national funding for the purchase of cargo bikes and private, family cargo bikes, but also commercial cargo bikes. But and then also a lot of Germany has several landen. It's a different division than we have, and then the cities themselves have that. But when really what you mentioned, like swapping a car for a cargo bike, I don't know. That's not for a lot of people. I don't think that's also very realistic yet. Although for us that's quite logic. I did, but that's not for a lot of people the same.
Maybe it's about changing that mindset, which is obviously what Gareth was talking about. We're bang on 2 o'clock, so I'm just going to quickly conclude now. I'm just going to ask each panelist, so this is going to test you now, because it was supposed to be a sentence. I'm going to reduce it to a word. So for each panelist, if you can go around, what is the one thing that needs to happen for more people to consider using a cargo bike in cities across the UK? So does anyone want to start?
I'm happy to. I'm biased, but a trial schemes, lower entry points, low financial.
Great. Who's next, Bex?
Infrastructure and parking.
Okay. I'll give you that. You're allowed to run 2 into 1. Gareth.
So probably something like a government incentive scheme along the lines of the vouchers to get your bike fixed, some sort of financial stimulus. Here's £500, go and spend it. A cycle to live rather than a cycle to work.
That's a really nice idea. Yeah, that might be on your battle bike for the next election. And finally, Jos, what do you think?
Yeah, it's very difficult to add anything like that, but I believe very much in putting the example. Just do it, and therefore I like a lot what Gareth said about normalizing. you know, there has been a campaign for Lego to have cycle path and cargo bikes, and so children get used to cargo bikes and cycling. So I giving the good leading by example, that's really what will make the change. Normalize.
That's a good point. Cheers, guys. Well, hopefully we can sort of start to, you know, just pull apart what we've discussed moving forwards and sort of use the findings of this panel as the basis of who knows, as a roadmap to look at how UK cities can begin to sort of increase non-commercial uptake. I'd like to obviously just thank all our panelists who've been excellent, and sorry about the constraints on time, particularly for you, Jos. And I'd just like to thank everyone that's joined us, and sorry we just couldn't get through any more questions. An hour is just not long enough to discuss such an interesting subject. Finally, I'd just like to thank Hamish and the organisers at Car Free Day for letting us host the panel, and just encourage everyone to enjoy the rest of the summit and tune into the other events.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Charles. Huge thanks to Charles for hosting the panel. This is a lot of work, and thanks to the speakers. And I think, you know, our line at Car Free Day is there is nowhere to go but up. I mean, we all have ideas and capacity, and there's more than enough money in this world, and certainly in the UK, to do this. So, you know, let's scale it up, and all ideas welcome. And check out Charles's resources, because he's done a lot of work on this, on both commercial and non-commercial side of things. And we will share a recording of this webinar with some materials, including the presenters' slides, in the first week of October. But thanks to everyone, and I think there's going to be a lot of progress in the decade of the cargo bike. Have a good afternoon.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye.